speaker because the first one actually talked about how we should live, and that's right. And I'm here to present you the evidence of what we found that will substantiate what the first speaker has been speaking of in the morning. So my topic initially was about incense exposure, and I think that is also culturally sensitive in a certain way. But I extend it to more like smoking and also the biological factors involved, so to give a fair share of the story. So I work with NPC most of the time, and also recently colorectal cancer, and very recently with a couple of my students and my postdoc in my lab, we started working on lung cancer because it's also one of the major cancer in the world. As you can see, based on the statistic, it is no joke. Its mortality rate, its incidence rate in the world is high. If we look at Malaysia itself, it's the third most common cancer. So it's among the top 3. So we all know these environmental factors and genetic factors, and that's where today what I want to do is present the evidence. It's up to you. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. Of course, we cannot force people in their lifestyle, as the first speaker had mentioned. It's not that easy, but in this case, we present the evidence to you. So we need to understand these 2 factors, the environmental factors together with the genetic factors. So what I'm presenting here today is not something that's not established. I'll be presenting 2 studies. Study 1, which is the association with incense burning to lung cancer, and then the second studies, which is a genetic factors that is involved in predisposition to lung cancer. So the first one, the rationale of our studies is that if you look at literature, there's mixed result regarding incense burning. Now, the minute I mentioned incense, even this morning when I mentioned to a colleague, and she said she used mosquito coil, and is that dangerous? So let's see what the evidence says. Okay, so there's uncertainty. So that's what we, together with my research group, what we did was it's not just to embark on an empirical test. What we do is gather the studies of what has been published so far, and we do a meta-analysis. That is a more powerful form of analysis. And then our objective is to assess whether there's an overall association between incense burning and lung cancer among Asians. So just to help you along, what we do is we follow certain guidelines. Because every time I mention meta-analysis to some of my colleagues, they start, okay, you're getting secondary data. It's okay, but there are strategies, and those of you who are doing this, you know that there are strategies by which we ascertain that the data that we get is of quality. So I'm not going to go through this method, but this is basically to show you that we went through quality assessment before we do data extraction, and we perform a very robust statistical analysis of this. You want to know more, I can direct you to the publications that we have, or we can discuss more after this. Right, so from a total of 1,726 publications, we do quality analysis and narrow it down to only 9 that we can analyze. And this is very typical for meta-analysis. I was informed by the experts doing this. Right, now I think you're more interested in the results. Of course, I have to show you some of the forest plots and stuff, but I'll get to the results soon. So, based on the overall data analysis, what we present here is that there is an association somewhat, a 33% higher odds of association with incense burning to developing lung cancer, comparing between those who are exposed and those who are not exposed. And we ascertain this by saying that by looking at Edgar tests and our funnel plot, saying that we are not just picking studies, they are skewed. That means sometimes the studies that people analyze, it could be just based on significant result, but we also look at insignificant result, and we came up with this. Right. So then we went to subgroup analysis. We look at gender-based analysis. We look at subject source. Subject source means where is the patient recruited, or where is the individual, the subject recruited for the studies. Is it from the population or is it from the hospital? So I do not want to bore you with this statistic of forest plot. What I want to show you here is this, the overall data, which will be of more interest to the rest of us. Look, men, there is a significant association for men. Okay, for women, not so significant despite the statistic. Okay, now ever smokers, definitely. Ever means smokers. Never means never smoke. So if you smoke, there is an increased risk. Meaning to say, smoking is a risk multiplier for incense burning. So those who are exposed to incense and yet they smoke, there is an increased risk. Okay, and for never smokers, no meaningful effect. Now, if you tag the source from hospital and the population base, they are both significant. Meaning to say that it's not, we're not just testing individuals, we're not just getting to individuals from the hospital. Some people say, oh, of course you go to the hospital, there you go, you get all these significant association. No, it's also in population. Meaning to say that this result that we have here is actually generalizable. Now, so the salient points from our first studies. The strong evidence supporting some association, but we saw that there is a gender difference. Men, significant increase, whereas for women, inconclusive. This is a time that I sometimes feel it's better to be a woman. Even my postdoc, everybody in the lab are ladies. Wonderful, brilliant minds. And I'm the only man, so when the result came out, I looked at the rest of my team and said, it's better to be a woman in some instances. Now, there are possible explanation for that because there is some literature to say that women have a higher innate adaptive immune response. Again, this is a time we feel it's better to be a woman. And in men, because of testosterone, which I'll show later on, there is a somewhat biochemical process that somehow increases the risk. Now, nevertheless, if you smoke, if an individual smokes, incense burning has 4 more times more fine particulate. Together with cigarette smoke, tobacco, it multiplies the effect. So don't smoke. Okay? I think the ladies sitting here, more or less preaching to the converted. Most ladies don't smoke except in overseas. But a lot of men smoke. I do, but I stopped years ago. Right, so this is the first study. This is the biochemical pathway that we propose why it's kind of higher in men. For example, like in normal conditions, testosterone is reduced by certain enzyme, and then these things interact with activated androgen receptors in the man, and this can contribute to tumor growth and so on and so forth. But these are usually regulated. Now, if a person is exposed to incense, this chemical from the incense, long name but it's shortened to PAH, actually combines with the processed metabolites from testosterone and increase its ability to attach to the androgen receptor. That means this multiplies the effect and then even enhance further cancer susceptibility and cancer onset. So this is one of the possible explanations. Right, now we move on to the second studies looking at the genetic background, because when we talk about the environmental exposure, it's not so fair. We actually need to look at the genetic background, somewhat in lung cancer. There's many genes associated with lung cancer, but we pick one that is the cytochrome P45. If you want its family member, 2A113. Okay, now why? Because this one is mainly expressed in the respiratory tract. If you want to see a computer model, is somewhat like this. So there's a lot of studies to show that this particular family member of cytochrome P450 is somewhat associated with cancers. But again, there are very mixed results. So again, we apply meta-analysis here to see whether this polymorphism has any effects on risk of lung cancer, and we also compare between smokers and non-smokers, and between different geographical regions like East Asians and the Europeans. So again, we performed this form of analysis. We collected data until late last year. At the end, we ended up with about 10 studies to analyze after quality screenings and all the statistics that we did. So this shows that on overall analysis, when we are looking at the combination variance, okay? There's a word missing here, sorry, the combination variance, because this gene has multiple variants, this particular gene. So if we look at all the combined variants, there is not really quite an association. There's no meaningful association. So we look at subgroup analysis, we went to East Asian. And when we look at East Asian, what we saw that there is a 22% lower odds. Now this is happy news. That means for this particular combination variance, when we talk about 22% lower, it doesn't mean it's high, that means less risk. That means people with this kind of combination variance have a preventive effect against lung cancer. So, but when we then do a subgroup analysis on smokers, we found that for all the smokers, there was also somewhat a non-significant increase. However, if you look at the European smokers, there was a very high increase if they have combination variant. So for Asian smokers, there's in fact a reduced reduction. That means this combination variant provides a preventive effect. But for smokers, don't smile yet. Our result doesn't end here. Don't smile yet and say, haha. Okay, now if I have this gene and if I'm part of East Asian, I can smoke till my lung burns. Now we never know what kind of variants that we have. So now if you look at the homozygous variants that only 2 copies, okay, not all. So there is no significant effect also, okay. If you look at the subgroup analysis, if you are in East Asia, if you have a homozygous variant, you have a higher odds. That means there is an increased risk. So if you go to genetic test and you find that I have a combination variance, you may smile a little bit. But if you found out that you have a homozygous variant of this gene, that means you were susceptible. Right, so for homozygous variants among smokers, so we look at East Asian, because it's more pronounced among East Asian. It increased even further. If you're Asian, East Asian, you smoke, you have a homozygous variant, it's very high risk. Okay, so what this final plot proves that we're not just simply making up stories when we do meta-analysis. We are actually generating data that are not skewed, right? So what are the salient points? Basically, in terms of this genetic effect, there are mixed signals. There's a combination variant, you have protective effect. But if you have homozygous variants, it's risky, right? So that obviously more work have to be done to probe this, but the protective effect of the combination contrasts with risk boosting among homozygous suggests a complex gene environment interaction. But the bottom line here is that despite the variance, if you have smoking status, in East Asia, if it is a homozygous variant, there's significant increased risk. In Europeans, if you have the combination variants, is significantly increased risk. Meaning to say that we don't know what kind of variants that we have in our system. You could be an East Asian and ended up with a homozygous variant that means there is increased risk. And if that person smoke, it increases it even further. Right. Now, we come to the end of this. This is the students that is assisting me in this what the postdoc involved. Our project, interestingly, is sponsored by the Sarawak Digital Economic Corporation. Digital economy is also interested in health, which is great, and of course, acknowledgement to UNIMAS. Now, I know I have 5 minutes left, but I want to take this opportunity that this morning, when the speakers talk about the food factors, now it's very difficult, and the lifestyle, it is very difficult. It's even more difficult among men because we are not work as disciplined as a woman. And ladies, you have some protective effect, as I have seen, and you have more discipline in the lifestyle. Whereas for men, sometimes you gasak on in terms of food. I have to admit, when I talk about smoking and so on, and this morning there's an alcohol, I consume alcohol, no joke. I smoked when I was young, but I stopped in 1997, totally. If I were to be someone, I started doing cancer research in 1996 when I went to Queensland, and I stopped drinking. Even in Australia, where drinking is so popular, and I stopped smoking totally, not even touch cold turkey in 1997. Now we can do it. For men, I'm preaching to you, you can have that kind of discipline. In my case, the discipline was also helped by the fact that in 1997, I met my partner, who is my wife currently, and she knows my habit, and she actually told me. So this is something the ladies can do to their loved one. My girlfriend, she said, if I don't smoke, if I don't stop smoking, if I don't stop drinking, she will leave me forever. Okay, so that was a very strong message. There is nothing wrong in the ladies telling their loved ones this, because you care for their health. So that is a very strong message. So yeah, we present the evidence that no matter whether the genetic factors or what you are exposed to, when you smoke, smoking multiplies the effects of lung cancer. So for those today who are still, please stop. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.